Hi guys, thanks for having me today. I'm Jane Wilch. I'm the City of Iowa City's Recycling Coordinator. And just for a little bit of background about how I got to where I am today. So I went to the University of Iowa. I graduated from Iowa. And the two main degrees that I got were environmental science and environmental policy and planning. I also did the certificate in sustainability. Whether you guys are directly interested in environmental science or not, a sustainability certificate is a really good pairing to really any major you guys do. So depending on what you study, if you have any interest in sustainability, I would definitely recommend looking into that. There's just a lot of flexibility within the certificate. It's a really rewarding program for sustainability.
Say your education one more time.
Environmental science.
Right.
And then environmental policy and planning. The longest word possible for a degree, I know, yeah. All right, guys, and then once I graduated, I ended up out in Aspen, Colorado. I was working on outreach and marketing work for our climate action department out in Aspen, so I worked for the city out there as well. About a year and a half ago, this job came up as the recycling coordinator, so I ended up back in Iowa City. Now, in terms of what we represent in terms of waste management for the city of Iowa City, there's really three areas that I want to talk to you guys about in terms of how we fit into that. So the first one is the landfill. How many of you guys have been out to the Iowa City landfill before? A few of you guys? Awesome. Okay. I did tell Ms. Head if you guys at any point wanted to, or we're happy to have you guys out there and you guys can see it in person as well if you've not been out there. So out at the Iowa City landfill, which is actually just, if you keep going down on Melrose a few more miles, you'll hit the Iowa City landfill. So out there what we have is obviously the actual landfill where all your trash goes. So if you guys have thrown anything away in Iowa City, in anywhere in Johnson County, Riverside, Kelowna, that's our whole service area. So if you've thrown anything away in any of those areas, that's where your trash goes, out where I work. So if you guys want to see that image, again, we're happy to have you. Also out at the landfill, we've got our compost facility. So if you guys are curbside customers, for example, and you put yard waste at the curb, that's where that goes. We make all that yard waste and food scraps, convert that into compost, and then we sell that back to the community. We also have our hazardous material collection facility out at the landfill. So if you guys have household cleaners, lawn care items, even things that you guys wouldn't necessarily think of as hazardous, so things like nail polish remover, hairspray, all sorts of different things, right? All that is actually termed hazardous. So if you guys are done using something, you don't like something, it's old, whatever, we'll take all that hazardous material out at that facility, right? And we'll properly handle it from there. So the landfill is the first big area. The second big area are our recycling drop-off locations. So the landfill is actually one of those recycling drop-off locations. We've got two more in the community. One is on North Dodge. It's actually in the old Hy-Vee parking lot. And then we've got Eastside Recycling Center also, and that's on Scott Boulevard on the east side. That's where my main office is at. So at those centers, we've got kind of the basic recycling that you would also see at curbside. So metals, plastic, paper, cardboard. We've also got glass. At Eastside in the landfill, we've got a few other unique opportunities too for those special recycling programs like electronics, motor oil, small appliances, all sorts of different stuff. So if you guys ever have questions about what to do with something, you've got a material, you don't know if it can go in the trash, if it can be recycled, really how to dispose of it, I'm the person to talk to on that. So feel free to reach out to me on that. So recycling drop-off locations, that's the second area. The third area are our curbside collections. So how many of you guys live in Iowa City? Quite a few of you? Okay. How many of you guys have curbside service where you put a cart at the curb, they come and pick it up? Awesome. Okay, so we've got some curbside customers in here. Awesome. So what that means is that we've got a municipal hauler for trash, recycling, and organics. Organics is yard waste and food waste. So we've got 3 trucks that come by your house, empty those carts. The trash truck goes out to the landfill to empty that out into our landfill cell. Recycling goes to our transfer station where it gets baled, so basically compacted into a bale, which is just a square cube of compacted material. And then it gets sent to our sorting facility where they sort it based off of paper with paper, plastic with plastic, etc. Sort it basically. And then finally, that organics truck goes also out to the landfill to our compost facility, and that's where that truck gets emptied out into a big organics pile. We grind up that material and over about a year process convert that into compost. So those are really the 3 main areas how we fit into the waste management world in Iowa City. Now, how I fit into that in terms of as the recycling coordinator, I interact with all three of those areas. So really my job, the three big things that I do are the maintenance and helping with the logistics of those three areas. So it could be answering those questions. What do I do with shredded paper? What do I do with this bulky plastic item? To, hey, my cart didn't get emptied, what do I do? Basically, just a lot of questions, a lot of different areas there, the logistics and maintenance of that. The second big thing is that I'm always looking for new recycling programs. So there's still a lot of materials that we have work to do with, right? There's still a lot of things that our only answer right now is put that in the trash. So I'm looking for answers for how we can divert those materials through other programs. So just for a few examples, guys, to give you some perspective on some materials that we don't currently have programs for. I mentioned bulky plastics. So if you guys have like a big plastic drum, for example, we don't have an option for that right now. My answer to that would be regular trash. I don't like that answer. So I'm looking for, well, what are some recycling options locally in Iowa or in the Midwest that we could do with this material? So looking into that. Another big one is mattresses. That came up in the first presentation too. Mattresses are something that have a lot of different types of material in them. There's wood, metal, the foam, the fluff, all of that, right? So there's a lot of different types of material in there that we could be using. We could be pulling those materials out, recycling them. But another big issue with particularly mattresses as a material going into a landfill is that they're a nuisance. They're something we don't want in a landfill. They don't compact well, they're bouncy, so they really don't smush down that well. And then when they do start to break apart and we've got equipment running over them, there's metal coils that get caught up in our equipment, so it becomes a safety hazard. So for a few reasons there, first of all, materials that could be utilized, right? Valuable materials that we could be keeping in the loop, recycling. And then a safety hazard, there's a few reasons why I'm motivated to look for a recycling program for those. So again, looking for any sort of possibilities, opportunities for keeping materials in the loop. And then the third big thing is education and outreach. So just like what I'm doing here talking to you guys today, we especially during this time of year have a lot of education and outreach we do in April. Why do you guys think that is? What's coming up?
My birthday.
Birthday? Awesome. Glad you guys know that. So April 22nd is Earth Day. We have a lot of schools, groups, organizations that are thinking about the environment during this time of year. I encourage you guys to think about the environment during all the rest of the year too, but it's great that there's a lot of programs during this time of year. So we're doing a lot of education. There's a lot of presentations and events. So when I'm doing education, when I'm doing outreach, what I'm trying to talk to you guys about is landfilling, waste reduction. We talk about all those different areas in terms of what programs are available to you guys and how to properly use them, but also why it's important. And we'll go over a lot of that today in terms of, well, why are we even talking about this? Why is it important to recycle or reuse or compost, right? Okay, guys, so that's kind of the overview of the area I work in. Do you guys have any questions about everything we just talked about before I start moving into the problems and solutions?
Did you guys get, can I erase this part?
Oh, it's fine. We can redraw it. That's fine. Okay. All right, guys. So moving right along to talk about current problems that exist in our community that need solutions. So a lot of the stuff that I'll talk to you guys about here is stuff that definitely are problems. It's stuff that I continue to look for solutions on, but a lot of these things that I'll mention are pretty big problems. So it's hard for just me to be working on them. That's part of the issue. The other issue is that it's gonna take all of us, right? It's not just me who's gonna be able to solve a lot of these issues. We look at waste management. How many of you guys produce trash? Show of hands. It should be everybody, right? All of you guys produce trash, right? So this is really something that involves all of us, right? Okay, so the first problem I want to talk to you guys about is some misunderstanding of waste. So we'll talk about two things. We'll talk about some costs and what happens to waste when you throw something away. So how many of you guys, and again, this is an environment where I want you guys to be honest. I want this to be a conversation. There's no judging here. How many of you guys don't think about your trash when you throw it away? It's gone, right? Okay, yeah. I struggle with that too, and I work at the landfill. I stare at your trash every day, right? And I still struggle with that. So in terms of what happens to our trash when it goes away, well, one of the main things I want to tell you guys in terms of where it goes, obviously we talked about where it goes to the landfill, right? But it doesn't go away, right? It's something that stays with us for a very, very long time. One of the reasons for that is when we look at a landfill type of environment, which is a big hole in the ground that we engineer. We'll talk about what that means to engineer a landfill in just a moment here. But when we think about that type of environment where we're burying something, there's no light and there's no air, so no oxygen. So that's the perfect type of environment to preserve something. So, you know, they've pulled up landfills several decades after things have been buried, and the newspaper is still in perfect condition where you can read the print, right? It's basically preservation. So things don't just go away. It's not like a compost pile. It's not like leaves in our backyard over the season they break down. It's a very, very different type of environment. Now, while that trash doesn't go away, there's other things happening that we have to make sure we're monitoring and paying attention to. So when trash ends up in a hole, there are a few things that are produced. So we've got some liquids that are produced. Those liquids are called leachate. Now, leachate is basically the more basic term that we say for that is garbage juice. So any liquid that comes in contact with our trash is called leachate. It's pretty nasty stuff. It's got chemicals, heavy metals, pollutants in it. It's stuff that we would not want you guys to be exposed to. It can make you sick. It can also make our environment sick. So we collect that and we send that directly to Iowa City wastewater to be treated. So while the liquids fall down to the bottom of the landfill cell, what do you guys think is rising to the top? The states of matter, guys. Gas. Yep. So we've got leachate that's falling to the bottom of the cell. We've got methane that's rising to the top. So it sounds like you guys have been through your climate lesson so far, right? You guys have talked about greenhouse gas emissions? Okay. So you guys have probably all heard about methane before. Methane is a lot more potent than carbon dioxide. The stats, you might know better than me on this. The stats, it's like 20 to 70 times worse than carbon dioxide, which is a huge range. But anyway, according to the story, guys, it's a lot more potent than carbon dioxide in terms of its climate warming ability. So that's something that we don't want released directly into the environment. We also collect that and we vacuum that to a methane flare where we flare it off as carbon dioxide. What do you guys think is something better we could be doing with that than just burning it off? Any ideas?
Use it for something else.
We could use it for something else. We could use it to fuel, do electricity or heating a home or buildings, all sorts of things. So right now, this year, we're actually looking into options for that. We've got a feasibility study where we're looking into all options, all possibilities of what we could be using that gas for. So in about a year, we should have some pretty good findings from that on moving forward, what some solutions will be, right? So in terms of a landfill, before we even get trash in that hole, how do we build that hole? That's the next perception I want to talk to you guys about in terms of the costs of what that means to throw something away. So, what do we got? Thank you. Oh, it's fine. No worries. We'll work with multicolors here. Okay, guys. So, giving you guys a little bit of an understanding on what a landfill looks like. So, work with my artistic ability here. This is what a landfill looks like in terms of the aerial view. So this is kind of the shape of our Iowa City landfill. So the entranceway from Melrose is right up here. So guys, we're basically right over here, West High. So you drive into the landfill, a trash truck comes down to a landfill cell, empties the trash truck out, and then we have equipment. We've got a dozer and a compactor that help to move that trash and then smush that trash down into where they want it in that hole. So if we think about a landfill and costs, about what it costs to run and build and everything else, a landfill, one cell, just one hole out of that entire property, what we do is we construct the hole, right? So we have to compact soil down, we have to engineer the hole, make it very stable. After we have a stable hole, we put down a liner. So it's called a flexible membrane liner, which is basically a really, really thick plastic sheet. So if you guys think about leftovers that you have, maybe after dinner, you put them on a plate, you put plastic wrap over them, you do that to keep the food in, right? So just like you put plastic wrap on food to keep that food in, keep it in the dish or on the plate, same with our plastic liner in the landfill hole. So we wanna make sure that that trash stays in the hole, that nothing gets out. So we have a plastic liner that we put down. Once we have that down, we've got a series of pipelines that run through. Now, we talked about methane, we talked about leachate. That's what those pipelines are for. We're collecting that leachate, so as there's liquids that form, as there's gas that forms, we collect all that and we deal with it. We monitor that, right? We clean that up. So once we have pipelines down, then we start to fill. Now, this, where I have this red triangle here, guys, this is our current landfill cell. So this cell is FY09, which stands for fiscal year 2009, is when it was built. So this cell, just this one little triangle here, what do you guys think for cost? How much do you guys think it costs just to build that hole, get that liner down, get those pipes in there?
Million?
What's that?
One? I said $1 million.
$1 million? Yeah. Any other guesses? Just throw it out there, guys. Any numbers?
80,000.
80,000?
3 billion, I heard that, 3 million, so we got 3 million, okay.
Yeah, you guys are getting closer. So just, what was that?
He was 5 million.
5 million? Okay, yeah, you guys are getting warmer. So just this little triangle down here, and again, before we even put trash in the hole, just building it, that was $7 million. Now, if you guys remember back to, I think it was 2012, before my time working for the city, there was a landfill fire. How many of you guys remember that? Yeah, a lot of black smoke in the air. Yeah, bad air pollution. So that landfill fire happened in that cell, that red triangle that I've got there, guys. So what that whole story was, we don't really know. We don't know what caused the fire. There was a trash truck that came in right when we had opened the cell up. It had unloaded the trash. There was something hot in that trash load, so we don't know if it was a battery that sparked. We don't know if it was, hot ashes from a residential grill that maybe just weren't completely put out yet. We don't know what it was, but it was something that was hot, and it caused a fire. Now, in that brand new built landfill cell, what we had down on the top layer was a drainage layer. Now, typically what we use for a drainage layer is shredded tires. So you guys think of tires, what are those made out of? Rubber, which is oil, right? So we've got all of a sudden a fire that has started on a whole layer of shredded tires. So it became a very, very hot fire because it's tires burning essentially. We couldn't do much with it other than try to contain it the best that we could for a few months. We had staff that were working 24 hours watching that fire just to make sure it didn't get out of control. So 2 or 3 months later, we were able to start putting it out and smother that fire, but caused a lot of damage. It was a really scary time at the landfill. So again, it was that landfill cell that we constructed at $7 million that all of a sudden caught on fire. That took the price all the way up to $10 million. So again, this is a landfill cell that we haven't even put trash in yet, right? It's just the build of the cell. It's not including the equipment, which the equipment alone is also millions of dollars. The fuel that we measure in gallons per hour. So we use a lot of diesel for that equipment to run everything, to maintain that site. There's a lot of fuel involved. And then the staffing. So if you guys think about all of these certifications and trainings that our staff need to make sure they're doing it right. We, in terms of what we work with landfilling, with hazardous material, with all sorts of things that we do out there, there could be some pretty hazardous situations if we don't know what we're doing correctly to protect ourselves and protect others around us and the environment as well. So that certification, that training that we're all required to have is pretty expensive as well, to make sure we're doing that right. So to ensure that we're protecting our air, protecting our water, protecting the environment, and protecting our people costs a lot of money, right? So again, trying to break that perception that landfilling is cheap. It's just putting something in a hole. There's a lot more to it than that, guys. It's really a well-engineered system. And when you throw something away, it's not just ending up in a hole. It becomes something that we have to be environmentally responsible for. And there's a lot of monitoring and maintenance for years to come with that too. So a lot involved with that. Any questions on that, guys, before we move into kind of the next topic? Yeah.
How big is the cell?
Yeah, so one cell, and actually, guys, for a more relevant example, this little rectangle here, this is actually going to be our next cell. So this cell down here, FY09, we're finishing up in just about the next 2 or 3 months. We'll start dumping trash in this next cell. And that is about 6 acres in size. And how long that takes to fill, we estimate about 1 acre per year.
So how big is an acre? Like, I don't have a good.
Yeah, so I was at another presentation earlier this week and they looked it up. The closest estimation was like a football field.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so if you guys can think of like 6 all in one hole. So 6 acres, this little rectangle here. So that gives you an idea too, guys, of how big this land is too. So overall, I didn't draw. What I drew is where the cells are. There's a little bit more land out here as well. About 400 acres in total. Yeah. It depends. So probably under 100 feet in terms of depth right now, but we build that up higher too. So we've got certain permits from the Department of Natural Resources on how high we can build that. And that's based off of what plot of land we're in. It can also vary how deep we can go depending on where we're building that cell. Yeah, yeah. So guys, another important thing with that too, when I gave you that estimation. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just heard it.
No, you're good.
What are you building with? Like when you're building a cell, like you talked about the lining material, but if you're building it up, out of what?
So once we're putting trash in it, how do we build it up? Yeah, so the 2 main pieces of equipment that we use, guys, are a dozer and a compactor. So a dozer is really, and these are high-powered equipment. I mean, they can roll over trash like no one's business. You don't want to be in the way of that equipment. But the dozer essentially moves the trash where we need it. So if we're building it up, we move that trash exactly to what cube we want it. So if you think about, it's trash, right? But it's, again, a really well-engineered system. So they know exactly where they want that trash to go to build that cell up properly and make it as stable of a whole as they can. So they're really trying to smush things together as much as they can. So that dozer moves that trash into place. That compactor rolls over that trash to get it as level as they want it to be.
I was thinking you were using something else to build up the side and then continuing to fill, but you're actually building up the trash itself.
We are, yep, absolutely. Yep, just as that material comes in, we use that as the material. Yeah, exactly. So guys, the 2 things that are involved too with that moving target of saying about an acre per year on how long that cell will last. So that cell, in theory, should last 6 to 7 years. What we say is, the footprint of an acre, and then we build up, right? Now, that's a moving target when I say 6 to 7 years because it depends on 2 things. It depends how much trash you guys are gonna bring me. We're all the ones producing the trash, right? I produce trash. I'm not innocent, right? So how much trash are we gonna produce in the next 7 years? And what types of trash? So a few things that came up, we talked about mattresses, for example. That doesn't compact very well, right? That's a hazard in the landfill. We also don't like it because we can't do much with it. It basically is the size that it is. Another category like that is construction and demolition waste. So again, thinking of concrete and siding and wood and all that, that's some pretty solid material that you really can't break down any more than it already is. It's pretty solid. So can't really compact that down. So types of material and how much trash is produced are the 2 big factors there. Any questions on that, guys? Okay, so the next big topic that I want to talk to you guys about is downstream versus upstream of a product's life. Do you guys have any idea what I mean by downstream versus upstream? No? So the downstream is where I work, is the landfill. So the downstream is, well, I'm done with this product, I'm going to get rid of it now. So it's when you're done using something, what happens to that item? That's the downstream of a product's life. So that could be a trash can, that could be a recycle bin, could be a compost pile. Really, it's just what you do with something when you're done with it. The upstream of a product's life is everything that product goes through before it gets to you. So that could be, if you think of a food item, we think of an apple. Well, there's the growing of an apple tree, right? There's the maintenance of the apple tree. So you need to water it. There's probably some fertilizer you have to use. You have to harvest the apple, right? Which is probably some manpower, some machinery. There might be some processing for that apple. There's a lot of transportation, a lot of distribution in that to get it to the store where you guys show up as consumers and buy it, right? So all those steps that happen before you even picked up that apple to buy it is what the upstream is, okay? So the reason why we're talking about upstream versus downstream, I encourage you guys to get more mindful, become more mindful of the upstream. And my goal with that is if we know what something went through to get to us, how much work, how much was involved in making that item to get to us, maybe we'll use it more wisely. Maybe we'll eat that apple and make sure it doesn't get wasted, right? So another good example of that too, guys, is a cell phone. So how many of you guys have one of these? Show of hands. Okay, lots of us have cell phones. It's 2019. Probably everyone in this room has a cell phone, right? So if we think of, again, the upstream, what types of materials are in this cell phone?
Well,
Who's got scotch? Yeah. You did conflict minerals, right? You guys are, you know this. Okay, great. Yeah. Illegal blood. Yeah, we talked about like the condom being
Good, that's perfect. So guys, it sounds like you know a little bit about this already. We're talking precious metals. So you guys know about some of the parts of the world where those precious metals come from, right? A lot of them aren't mined in the United States. Some of them we don't even have in the United States. So we're getting them from other parts of the world, or we might have them in the United States, but they might be cheaper to mine somewhere else, right? So there's a lot of decisions that go into making just this one device before it even gets to you. So if we think of the precious metals, they might be coming from places in the world that are areas of conflict, so there might be warfare or other things going on. They might not have the same labor laws as us. You know, in the United States, there's a lot of labor laws that protect us as workers, right? There's safety for workers, which doesn't always exist in other countries. So you think of the mining of metals, sometimes there has to be removal of rock ore from an actual metal, and to remove that, you have to use some heavy chemicals sometimes to do that. There's not always protective, face wear and gloves and everything else in all these other countries. So they might be exposed to things that are bad for their own health, right? So just thinking of the precious metal side, that's not the only thing that's in here though. We've got glass, we've got plastic that's from petroleum, we've got electronic components. There's a lot going into the cell phone, right? And that's before I even show up at the store to buy it, to use it. Now, if we think of, especially electronics, this is something that has also been a really, really interesting last decade with electronics. You guys see every year there's a new phone model that comes out, right? Yes. The next best phone, the next best laptop, or iPod, or whatever it may be, right? So there's this turnover electronics. We always want the next best thing, the upgrade. So what happens to all that stuff that you get rid of when you're done with it? Well, that's where we're seeing a whole nother issue, right? So we talked a little bit about the upstream of a cell phone, but think about the downstream of a cell phone. All of the demanufacturing that would have to go into this cell phone to environmentally handle it in a responsible way, right? So there's a lot to think about when we think of just a cell phone, for example. This cell phone is probably better traveled than most of us in this room, with all the different locations that those materials had to come from to make this one device for me to go buy it. Right? So again, guys, when we talk about the upstream and the downstream, I encourage you guys just to think of the whole life cycle of something in helping us to motivate us or promote us to actually be more wise about how we use those products. So an example with a cell phone is to use that cell phone for its full use, right? If it's still working fine, you don't need to upgrade. Keep using it, right? Okay, any questions on upstream versus downstream, guys?
I have a quick question about cell phones. So you talked about the demanufacturing. So is that where does that happen? Like I know if I go get a new phone, I typically just give them that phone and then the Apple store does something with it. But are they doing the right thing with it, or are they?
I can only speak for the program we have,
Sure.
so I don't always know what other programs are doing.
Sure.
There are some programs that don't have the same certifications. So it's always something to educate yourself on too, guys. Where does your electronics or other products end up if you're going through a recycling program? But the one that we use through the city is Midwest Electronics Recovery. It's out of Walford, Iowa, so not too far from here. And they do have very strict certifications in making sure that they're being very environmentally responsible in how they handle those products. So really it is a demanufacturing. It's taking apart the entire device, putting the plastic with the plastic, the precious metals with the precious metals, glass with glass, etc., to then try to find markets for those materials once they do essentially break that product down. Yeah. Yeah.
So I've never, like what Ms. Head said, she give your phone to someone, but if I do have like an old phone, where would I put that, or how would a person dispose of it?
Yeah,
On
definitely.
their own.
So if you guys have an old phone, or if you've got an old laptop, printer, DVD player, whatever that may be, we can take all those types of electronic waste recycling items out at the Eastside Recycling Center. So if you guys, how many of you guys have been out to Eastside? Where there's Restore, Salvage Barn, there's some good stuff out there? Awesome. Okay, so out there, around back of the building where you would normally donate something to Restore, that's where our electronic waste recycling is. You can take it right there, or out at the Iowa City landfill as well. So we've got programs for electronic waste at both of those locations. Yeah.
So if there is resources in the town that can still be used, do they take those and
Absolutely. Yep. So once that company actually breaks down, let's say it's a printer, for example, so they're putting plastic with plastic. If there's some copper wiring or something, they're definitely finding markets for those types of materials and making sure that they get recycled. Yeah. And especially if you guys think about electronics, even something as simple as, a small amount of copper wiring still has value. So if there's money to be made with some of these materials, there's most likely going to be a recycling market for it because some company is going to make money off of that by recycling it.
yeah. So just going back to the landfill stuff, you said the plastic sheets are used for salt, right?
Yep.
So you're talking about recycling, so what do you do with the plastic sheets that they don't exist?
So are you talking about the liner at the bottom of the cell? That stays there forever. Yep, so that's a really durable liner that's meant to essentially exist for as long as possible. Very durable. We want that to stay in place because we don't want that trash leaching into the soil, into the groundwater. Those are things we're really concerned with. We want to make sure that's a really durable liner. Yeah. Any other questions, guys?
You would know if it like this were coming over here.
We would. So especially what we do on site, we test groundwater twice a year. And that's typically where we would notice if there's a point source or non-point source pollution as well. So we test about 70 wells around the site, and we're testing really for leachate. So if there's those heavy metals, contaminants in there, sometimes it's really difficult to find exactly where the source of pollution is. So sometimes there's some excavating that's involved, really digging up an area to figure out what the issue is. If something does need to be resealed, we'll certainly do that. Sometimes it also happens on the surface. So there might be a leachate blowout. Literally, that's what it's called, where leachate blows out of the side of a hole, and we have to repair that, clean up that mess. Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
What parts of the whole trash cycle, like what places did you visit and just look around?
To learn more?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys can certainly, you guys are customers of our program. So if you guys wanted to come out to the landfill, check out what that looks like, you're certainly welcome to. Also, Eastside Recycling is always a really good one too we give tours out there of basically all the programs we have going on site, and then typically Restore and Salvage Barn too. Yeah, and Restore and Salvage Barn are really good examples of what we're doing too with the city in terms of they represent reduction and reuse, really trying to keep as much material out of the landfill as possible that's usable. Yeah.
How many cells are there in landfill and how many of them are filled up?
Yeah, so how many cells total? Let me think about that for a second. We probably have, I'd say 12 to 15 cells that already have stuff in them. Most of them are permanently capped, but we have some that are not. I don't know the exact number on the ones that aren't capped. But what that means is how many feet of soil we put on top of the cell. The thicker the amount, obviously we get more close to it being a permanent cap. There's a certain amount, I think it's 4 feet for it being securely capped but not permanent. We have to add more to actually make it a permanent cap. So yeah, and I think too, this land is unused, so that's where our next cell is going. We've got a lot of land up here too that will be the next future cell. So we still have a decent amount of land too that has not even been touched yet for trash. And then, some of those cells that aren't permanently capped could be reopened. Yeah.
What's the most type of trash that you see at the landfill?
Yeah, we can skip right to that. That's a great point. So, guys, this pie chart that you guys see, this is a waste characterization study that we do about every 5 or 6 years out at the landfill. And this is through the Department of Natural Resources, so it's very consistent data across the state, looking at a lot of different landfills. So what we find out from this is basically a waste sort, where there's residential and commercial trash trucks that come in, they pull to the side, they empty their loads, and we sort through that trash. So how many of you guys would want to sort through other people's trash? Kind of gross, right? Yeah. That's my job. So looking at this pie chart gives an idea of, well, what's going in the landfill? So what we found out from that waste sort, and basically what we do is we separate trash into about 60 different categories. So it's really specific. We want to know exactly the type of material that's going in there. So if we think of just glass, we're separating glass, green, brown, and clear are all gonna be separate containers because we wanna know exactly how much green glass is going in the landfill, right? Is that a problem? Is that something we need to work on? So, from that, we found out that about 25% of what's going in the landfill is paper. About 17% is plastic, so that's plastic bags, clamshell containers, plastic bottles, all that kind of stuff. We've got a little bit of metal, about 4%, a little bit of glass, about 3%. And then these numbers up here, guys, are a mix of some hazardous materials, some construction and demolition, some kind of other category where maybe it didn't fit into any of the 60 categories that we had. And then this 35% is really what I want you guys to pay attention to. So that's organics. That's food waste, yard waste, clothing, that type of material. Anything organic is in that category. Now, of that, the percentage I want you guys to pay attention to is food waste. So food waste is about 25% of everything that goes in the landfill. Food, right? So that's about 34,000 tons of material. The interesting stat, I tried to figure out a way to make that more tangible for my audiences to understand. Well, what does 34,000 tons mean, right? So I did a little calculation. What that equates to is about 17,000 mid-size SUVs, right? So I think the car I looked at was like a Kia Sorento. So you guys can imagine like a mid-size SUV, right? That's like putting 17,000 of those in the landfill. What would you guys think if you saw 17,000 cars in a landfill? You'd be like, what's up with that? Why are we wasting so many cars? So imagine that in food waste, right? So food waste is a really big issue out of the landfill. So that's something I definitely encourage. If you guys at all are interested in that sort of topic, I'd love to work with any of you guys that are interested in a project on food waste, because that's one of our biggest issues in our community. What do we do with that? And that's also looking at, you know, it's not a perfect system. We look around the world, we've got all sorts of environmental issues that are caused by the food industry. We've got hunger, we've got lots of issues, right? But yet we're wasting this food, 34,000 tons of food going down into the landfill. So that's a big concern, yeah. Okay, guys. Another thing I want to talk to you guys about is related to consumer, yeah.
Well, what about like compost? Would that still go to, I guess, how that broke down?
So, you meaning compost in the landfill?
Yeah.
So compost is the finished product that we get from the compost facility. So it's not compost until we essentially work those organics through the system. The difference too between putting food waste in a compost pile versus the landfill is really oxygen. So in a landfill, there's no oxygen, so you don't get the compost product in a landfill. If you put food waste or yard waste in a compost program, what we do is we grind that material up into basically long rows of compost, and we turn it every month. So there's oxygen getting into those piles, there's bugs and microbes and worms working away to basically break down that material. They're making carbon dioxide, they're making water vapor and heat. So that's why we turn those piles every month to basically keep those microbes happy and keep that process moving along. So it's kind of like facilitating what nature's already doing, right guys? You think of leaves in your backyard, that's something that if you just leave them, they will eventually break down. So we're basically speeding up that process. But the big difference with that is oxygen. So in a compost facility, we have oxygen, which causes it to go through a natural process, right? But a landfill is not a natural environment. Again, no light, no oxygen. So basically the perfect setup for preservation. Yeah. Okay. So guys, we talked about the upstream and the downstream. Another thing I want to talk to you guys about with this, and one of the big concerns we have, especially with consumerism in the United States, is disposable items. So we think about in the United States, we kind of all live a fairly fast-paced lifestyle. Convenience helps us out with that, right? So convenience a lot of times equates to things that are really easy to use. You use them once and you toss them and throw them out. So this could be something like a plastic bottle, right? You buy a bottle of water, you use it, and then you throw it in the trash can or the recycle bin. A plastic shopping bag, dishware, or at a restaurant, or in the cafeteria. Anything that you guys can think of in your life, and there's a lot of different types of products like this, right? That are termed disposable. You use them once or maybe a few times, then you toss them. They're easy to use, they're convenient. right? So while all this convenience, while these disposable items have become really popular in our society, we've kind of seen a different glance of that at the landfill, right? It's caused a lot of increase in waste streams at the landfill in terms of especially those disposable items. A lot of times those use some portion of plastic. So we're seeing a lot of that within that 17% plastic up there, right? But again, guys, thinking about the upstream and downstream, well, what does that mean? If we're using so many disposable items, what does that mean for the downstream? That means we're getting a lot of those in terms of what's ending up in that 140,000 tons of trash that we get every year at the landfill. Now, along with that, guys, too, consumerism is another big thing. So when I say consumerism, what I mean is you guys as consumers, as buyers, going to stores and buying things. So that's fine, we all need to buy things, right? We need toothpaste and contact fluid and laundry detergent and all sorts of things to live and to go through our day. All of that, that's fine. What I mostly want to talk about with consumerism is over-consumerism. So if we're buying too much stuff, we're buying beyond our means or just beyond our needs, right? So one of the big things that's come about in the last about 2 decades is something that's called fast fashion. So this is more geared towards clothing. But looking at, you go to a store, every week there's some new tops or dresses or pants or whatever on the shelf. New fashion, new style. About every week. It didn't always used to be that way, right? And you guys, you're pretty young. So the last 2 decades, that's basically your whole life. So that's really all you guys have known. But what I mean by this, in terms of especially fast fashion, and if this is an interest of yours for a project, guys, there's a really good documentary on Netflix called The True Cost, which talks about the different social and environmental impacts and injustices, especially related to the clothing industry. But what this really breaks down to is, well, it's really great that that T-shirt is $2 at whatever store I'm at. Yeah, that's great. I'm going to buy as many as I want because it's only $2. Well, what this really looks at, especially that documentary, The True Cost, is it looks at, well, how were we able to price it at $2? What's really behind the scenes as to how we got it down to be that cheap? Well, there's a lot of social and environmental injustices that are involved with that. So again, thinking of the upstream and the downstream, becoming wiser consumers. Part of what that means to you guys is consumer choice. So if we're talking about clothing, that $2 T-shirt might seem great, but how long is it going to last, right? A lot of the things that are priced that cheap don't necessarily last. They're not necessarily quality. So if we look at things that are well-made, quality clothing, quality electronics, whatever other product you guys want to talk about, or things that are local or made of recycled content, have some sort of sustainability message to them, right? There's a lot of different angles we could look at with this, but that's all related to consumer choice. And what I mean by consumer choice is that you guys are the consumers. When you make a choice where to put your money, that speaks, right? You don't even necessarily need to voice your concerns because you're putting your money, towards that product A versus product B. When you choose to buy product A, that sends a message to the manufacturer, well, I bought this product because it's made of recycled material and I want to be able to recycle my product when I'm done with it, for example.